some years ago, I wrote a book and biography of my teacher. It was written in English, but much of the research for that book I conducted in the late 1980s. When I wrote the Thai language biography, which was distributed at Ajahn Chah's funeral in 1993. And the name of the Thai version was Upalamani. So I want to tell you where this word came from, because I made it up. It's not a... So Ajahn Chah's, when he received a royal title, when you receive a royal title, you get a name conferred on you by His Majesty the King. And Luang Por Chah's name was Prat, which means like venerable, Bodhinyana, Thera, Bodhinyana. So it's Bodhi and Jnana. And so I wanted to incorporate the idea of Bodhi in the title. And my mind turned to the classic Mahayana, Vajrayana image of the jewel in the lotus. So in the famous mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. So Om is just this. It's like in Indian. I don't know if you're familiar with this, the philosophy and the idea of the word Om. It's said to be the universal sound, because it covers. If you make the Om and it comes up, and so you incorporate the belly, the chest, the mouth, and this one sound. So it's the universal sound. Money is a jewel, and Padme is the name for lotus, and Hum is just a kind of an exclamation. So the two key words here are, for the meaning, are money and Padme. So money, the jewel, is a synonym for Bodhi. And Bodhi, enlightenment knowledge, we can say, is compared to diamond, or it's compared to jewel, because it's very incredibly beautiful. It's something, as a diamond, it can cut through everything, just as the wisdom of enlightenment cuts through all delusion. And then I had a thought, because the word Ubon, and many of you have probably been to Ubon, I know it's not so common on road signs these days, but in the old days, Ubon on road signs would be spelled U-B-O-L, you see. Many people, why is it called Ubol when everybody calls it Ubon? Well, I don't want to go into the intricacies of Thai language too much, but Thai language is basically a tonal Chinese language which imposes its pronunciation rules on words imported from Indian languages. So the Indian word, one of the Indian words for lotus, is upala. And when you make upala, you import upala into Thai language, it becomes ubon. Okay, so that's the meaning of ubon. And the adjoining province, Yasothon, is derived from Yasodhara, you see. So you have to know the code, how these words have changed their pronunciation. So this is the wordplay, okay? So Ajahn Chah was the jewel of Ubon. So he's the money of Upala. So his Upalamani is the name of the book. Yeah, so that's, if you ever see this book, it's called Upalamani. So it has many different shades of meanings, play on words. So I wanted to talk about Bodhi, and this is my way into talking about Bodhi. And in Theravada Buddhism, we have I think a slight problem in talking about the goal of practice. It's not, it's not immediately kind of uplifting and wow, like some of the Hindu Advaita teachings about the ultimate goal of spiritual life, or even in the Mahayana teachings. And you say, oh, why are they practicing Theravada? Oh, so they don't have to be reborn anymore. It's kind of a bit of a downer, isn't it? I don't want to be born anymore. It sounds like kind of a bit negative and kind of one of the reasons why Theravada has this kind of miserable reputation. And so if you say, well, for Nibbana, you say, well, what's Nibbana? Well, nobody knows. It's like, I think Bodhi, so practicing for Bodhi is a kind of nice formulation. But also, when we look at the Pali language, again, we're always conditioned in certain ways by the languages we use. And Pali is a language which tends to use negative formulations. But if you, and in English you get this sometimes, it's like, say the word like incredible, which means it's not credible, it's not believable. But there's a very positive feeling to that word, incredible, isn't it? Which is not there in the word. And in Pali words, there's a lot of words like that which usually begin with the letter A. And they're saying not this and not that. But there's a positive correlate to that, correlation, that we often miss because Pali's a dead language and you don't hear people speaking it in an ordinary way. And so one question might come, why does Pali use the negative formulation so often? I would say because it's very precise. Especially you can see this in Sila. You say, Sila, you should love all sentient beings, see them as, maybe mothers and fathers in past lives and so on. You can get really high on that kind of language. But your mind, most minds are kind of tricky, and you can find ways to, oh, may you have a happy rebirth, and then sort of find you can find when, and you feel actually you're still, you're still on track, you're still. Whereas with Theravada, it's very precise. You do not intentionally take the life of any being. So it's a practical. It's an object of mindfulness. And this is something that people often miss. The 5 precepts are the 5 objects of mindfulness in daily life. Your 5 basic objects. There's the things that you bring to mind. They're your compass. So they are, they're not commandments. They are pegs for mindfulness. And having things formulated in the negative way helps you to be very precise and to be mindful more easily. So I was going to talk about Bodhi, and I got a little bit derailed there. What I want to say is that when we talk about the ultimate goal, what is Nibbana? You say the end of, no greed, no hatred, no. So it's always not this and not that. So although intellectually, you can, but this kind of, no. It's like you're losing out, It's like even bad things, it's, there's there's a story about these two men who have a meal in a restaurant, and one of them says, "That was so awful, terrible taste." "Yeah, I know, and such small portions as well." So even if it's terrible, you still complain about not being enough of it, and when you have this kind of not this, not that formulation, you can be mindful sometimes. It's just at least it's not sort of raising you up and inspiring you very much. So although we can't say what is Bodhi, or what is Nibbana, or what is the experience of Nibbana, that we take as our ultimate goal. What we can do is look at the Buddha and the great Savakas in the Buddha's lifetime and the great teachers from the Buddha's time until the present day, teachers like Ajahn Jayasaro, for example. And we can see that there are three distinct features of the enlightened mind. So we can't say what enlightenment is, but we can see how it manifests in the human mind. And the three qualities, there are two originally, and then one was kind of added on by the commentators. But the first two are wisdom and compassion. So all is like unlimited wisdom, unlimited compassion, and then the third one is purity of mind, or we might express that as ultimate freedom of mind. The freedom from defilements, the mind which is purified of defilements, means the same thing. So now we have a more positive goal for our practice. And Bodhi has expressed itself as wisdom and compassion, inner purity and freedom. So we say, oh, what are you Theravadins practicing for? We're practicing for unlimited compassion and wisdom and inner purity and freedom. For me, that's really much more inspiring, isn't it? So as objects of mindfulness, something really to keep track of is how motivated you are. Even if you have a lot of faith, motivation is not a fixed thing. It's not like, now I've got faith in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha and I'm going to be motivated for the rest of my life. It goes up and down. And we should observe what increases our motivation and what undermines it. And when you lose your inspiration, don't immediately, expect teachers or YouTube videos or whatever as something to give you inspiration. You should be learning how to create your own energy and to find ways of reflecting on Dhamma, which bring up that energy and help you to go through obstacles and difficulties in life. And so this is the first thing, this like to offer you, this idea of Bodhi, this idea of the qualities of an enlightened mind, because we see that in the Buddha, right? The Buddha is enlightened with wisdom. How is that wisdom expressed? He gets up and walks 200 or 300 kilometers to Sarnath and starts teaching. And what are the words that he uses to teach? Where does that come? That comes from his wisdom. So he's enlightened with wisdom. He walks all across the middle country for 45 years, teaching out of compassion with wisdom. Out of compassion with wisdom. This is what we see right until the very end of his life. And with a mind which is completely pure and purified and free from all defilements and pollutions of mind. So this is something that we can all take as our goal, isn't it? So what's our practice? How does that? How is that integrated into our daily life? Well, this is our motivation to become more wise, to be more compassionate, to be more free from, more purified from defilements. I hesitate to use that word purity. I think these days it's a problematic word. People can get very kind of rigid about purity, and in all kinds of religious traditions, can't they? And people get very attached. This is pure and this is impure, and this is why I prefer to formulate that third quality as inner freedom. So this is Bodhi, and in order to develop on the path, we need to be using our thinking mind. Thinking is not your enemy. At worst, thinking is a servant that's taken over the house and thinks it's the master or the mistress. But if we, without thinking, we wouldn't have this lovely hall. We wouldn't have the coolness of the room. We wouldn't have the microphone. People at the back wouldn't be able to hear me because I have a very soft voice. So we benefit in so many ways in our lives from our capacity for thought. Thought is not an enemy, but we need to have some inner discipline. We need to know time and place. And that means that when it's the correct and appropriate time to think, then we think. And when we don't need to think about anything, we can dwell in the non-thinking mind. And the opposite of thinking is not dullness. In fact, it's quite the opposite of dullness. It's so clarity of mind without thinking. That's something that we learn to appreciate through meditation. It's not going to happen otherwise, not in a consistent way. But freedom from thinking or absence of thought doesn't mean complete silence. It means that the mind is not caught up. It's like we're in this room and maybe there are traffic noises or things going on outside, and they're on the periphery of our attention. They don't draw our attention. If we want to pay attention to them, we can. If we don't want to, we don't need to. And that's a workable kind of inner silence, where thinking is not grabbing the mind and dragging it here and dragging it there. And it needs to be, I emphasize this again and again because I think it's not really well understood. When we talk about being in the present moment, being in the present moment does not mean the absence of the past and future. Because what do we really mean by the word past and future? Past is memory. As a direct experience, what is your direct experience of the past? The past is just an abstract noun. What is your direct experience? Your direct experience is memory. And what do we mean when we mean future? Well, we mean the direct experience of future, which means thinking. So we don't want to, how could we live a life without memory and thought and imagination? We can't. But what are we being warned against? What's the problem here? The problem is that we forget this is memory, and we forget that this is thinking. But when we are aware of memory as memory and thinking as thinking, and we use them appropriately at the correct time and with clearly defined goals, then that is the way that we practice, particularly in daily life. So we need to be using our thinking mind. And we need skillful means, or upaya. So this is the second, we call it upaya. This is for where we don't find so much in the Theravada tradition, and probably the nearest we have to is like yoniso manasikara. So upaya is actually skillful means, and kusala, yoniso manasikara is the way that we create skillful means. So we can divide yoniso manasikara, skillful reflection, wise reflection. There are so many different translations of this term. But there are two kinds of reflection based upon the goal of applying it. First is to increase or to promote kusala dhammas in the mind. Example, your mind's caught up in sensual thoughts and sensual perceptions and sensual desires, and then you can think and reflect upon the unpleasant sides of the physical body or the drawbacks of sensual desire. So you're using the thinking mind to counter the wholesome, intelligent thinking mind to counter the unwholesome, unintelligent thinking mind. And the psychological principle underlying this approach is a very simple one. At any single time, your mind cannot be wholesome and unwholesome. So you can, in many cases, you can simply replace an unwholesome Dhamma with a wholesome Dhamma. So if you do this frequently, and you develop a skill for it, and you develop a power with it, then you can very easily replace unwholesome thoughts, memories, with wholesome ones. It's not removing the root cause of the unwholesome Dhamma, but it's a skillful means. It's an upaya created by this ability to think systematically and to think in ways which are clearly opposing the unwholesome train of thought which is obsessing you. The other kind of yoniso manasikara is that which inclines the mind towards seeing the truth of things directly. So the three characteristics of existence of anicca, dukkha, anatta, which are penetrated by the mind in vipassana, leading to Bodhi, the first. We have to, for most of it, there are great beings, and some of the disciples of Lumpur Man are examples of this. They had so much accumulated barami and spiritual power from previous lives. It was very easy for their mind to go from strong focus and samadhi into wisdom. But for most of us, we have to do some preparatory work, particularly reflection on impermanence, reflection on dukkha, reflection on anatta, bringing our minds back to these topics again and again. We're reading the news, and we're talking things going on around us. We develop a facility for reflecting on them and seeing them in the light of the three characteristics. It's not vipassana, but it's creating the foundation for it. So you have a familiarity with anicca, dukkha, anatta on the thinking level, that when your mind goes beyond the thinking level, you have this pathway which can lead naturally to insight into the three characteristics. So upaya. And a lot of upaya is based on observation of body and mind. I noticed lay people many times, so many times people come up to me and they say, Ajahn, while I was meditating, I did this and I did that, and then my mind just got really calm. Is it okay? Is it all right to do that? And what they mean by that is they've never heard any monk talking about this before, or they've never read it in a book. And it's like there's a right way and a wrong way to do things, and they're afraid. But no, there isn't. You can be creative. And the principle that you have to bear in mind is expressed in the Pali phrase, Dhammanu Dhammapatibata, which means practicing Dhamma in accordance with Dhamma. So that sounds a bit weird, like a tautology, but what it means is practicing in the details or in particular techniques and approaches in ways which are in harmony with, consonant with the major principles. So once you've grasped the major principles, the important points of Sammaditthi, you can be creative. You can do stuff that you've never heard anybody else does, as long as you're sure that it's in harmony with the main principles. I'll give you an example, an upaya, something I wrote about recently. And have you observed when you're thinking, or when your mind is thinking a lot, there are very small movements in your tongue, in your vocal cords, your throat. You notice that? So there is this inner kind of sub-vocalization of a lot of thoughts. So I noticed this, and I thought, if thought and like streams of thought are associated with small movements. Why not just stop the physical movements and make your meditation object keeping the tongue still? Not trying to let go of the thing, just your focus is on keeping your tongue still. So you can try putting it against the teeth, putting it against the roof of the mouth, or keeping it still. Again, you can experiment. And I found it really worked. And that's not in any book, anywhere, I can guarantee. I made it up. But it's in line with the principles of bhavana. And so I'd be interested, you can be my guinea pigs, you can all give it a try and see if it works. So this is an upaya, okay. I wanted to talk about the Brahma Viharas, because these are so important. And in every category, the Buddhists think 3s of this and 4s of that and 5s of that and this and but these are not arbitrary groupings, they're not just sort of things thrown together, random, because the Buddha's teaching an organic and holistic system of spiritual education, or education of our whole life. And each member of these groups, has a role to play, and they are related to each other. And so you can't just take one. You just can't just take metta. You're just going to just have metta. And most importantly, in those 4 Brahma Viharas, loving kindness or metta, karuna, compassion, mudita, sympathetic joy, and upekkha, equanimity, this is part of your Dhamma study, to observe and understand how they work together as a whole. It's not just 4 separate things, I'll do a bit of this or I'll do a bit of that. They are all connected. And the key thing to remember here is in almost every category of Dhamma, you will find, if not the word wisdom, you will find a virtue. When we're talking about the wholesome qualities here, you will find a representative of the Buddha, of the wisdom function. Here, upekkha is the wisdom element in the 4 Brahma Viharas. So, wisdom here is understanding the law of karma and conditionality. So much of wisdom is understanding how things arise and pass away. What are the causes and conditions? This is why I often go on a rant about this thing. You can be whatever you want to be, this kind of virus that goes around the world. You can't, basically. Your desire to be something is one condition, and whether or not it will be successful depends on lots of other conditions all coming together. Anyway, understanding conditionality, understanding how things change, why things change, why they don't change. This is, when we see these clearly, the effect on our mind is it makes our mind level. And so we want to help somebody, we want to make them happy, or somebody's in a mess. They're just making a mess of their life, of their marriage, or they're addicted to drugs, or gambling, or alcohol, or something, and we just feel so much compassion and want to help them. And they don't want us to help. They're quite happy. Who are you to tell me I've made a mess of my life? I'm quite happy with my life, you say. Or they're in so much in denial, they can't accept it. Or they don't trust you enough to take your advice. Or they don't like you. So many different reasons, so many different conditions. So if you're only, metta or karuna, you can get really hurt, can't you? And get burned out. I did everything I could, and this is how he treats me. It's just, I just give up. But with upekkha, you can understand that your metta and your karuna and your loving kindness are conditions that might help to support that person free themselves from their dukkha. but you're not everything. There's so many other things. That person just may not be ready to be helped at that time in their life. There are other obstacles. And so understanding that metta and karuna are not enough. They contribute, they're wonderful things, and not something to be looked down on in any way. But it's not to say if you have a very pure intention and a kind heart that you're going to achieve anything, like tangible results that you can see and say, oh, through my metta and karuna I made that person's life better. Maybe, maybe not, or maybe it may take some years. But you need to have upekkha. And upekkha is that, yeah, this is the way things are right now. So the important word in that phrase is now, okay? It's not this is the way things are and that's the end of it. It's the way things are now, given the prevailing causes and conditions. But those causes and conditions are changing all the time. So you're in neutral gear. Something changes, something happens in that person's life, some crisis, something, and then you're ready. Now you can move into that more active mode and try to help that person again. But you have to look after your own heart. If you don't know how to look after your own heart, then a kind heart can lead you to a lot of unnecessary suffering. So you need the wisdom faculty to be able to maximize the benefits that you can give to others. Mudita is interesting thing about mudita is, when you look at what are the opposites, what are the things that the Brahma Viharas overcome. So metta overcomes anger, and karuna overcomes cruelty and indifference to, basically cruelty. Mudita, I think most people would assume its opposite, its opponent power is jealousy. So by finding joy in other people's happiness and success, then you wear away at your jealousy. Well, yeah, you may do. But in the Buddha's words, the opponent of mudita, and that which is reduced and eventually eliminated through mudita, is this sense of meh. It's like that kind of, everything's kind of grey and meaningless and dreary, and it's like so it's kind of depressed mood. So we say mudita is a very good something which prevents the depressed state of mind, because you're finding joy, you're finding happiness, and mudita is essentially recognizing and appreciating goodness. And once you can tune in to goodness, there's just so much of it around. It's not just positive thinking, kind of Pollyanna, everything's wonderful. No, it's not like that. There's just so much. If you're not looking sort of really big kind of dramatic acts of goodness and kindness and generosity, just every day, the things that go around us all the time. Just somebody opens a door for somebody, or somebody says, look out, it's a bit slippery there, you're going to make sure you don't fall down the steps when you're receiving monks who come to visit, and like that kind of goodness. And so open your eyes to goodness. This is mudita, and it's just so easy. I'm basically a kind of lazy person, and I'm always looking for lazy ways to enlightenment, and mudita is absolutely it. You don't have to do anything, you just watch other people doing it, and you just feel wonderful. Really, I mean, it's it's what they're not telling you. It's like, So these are the Brahma Viharas. Mindfulness, sati. Sati. What's the difference between sati and sampajanya? So sati is like you're on your telephone and you're completely, focused on what's on your telephone, and you're not You don't notice anybody else who's trying to walk past you in the airport or something like this. It's like sampajanya is what gives you context. Sampajanya is what gives you the purpose and the goal for sati. So one of the analogies would be driving at night, your hands on the steering wheel, that's sati, and the headlights showing the path, that's sampajanya. So they go together. And also atapi, which is a name for effort. And effort here in translations, it's usually the effort that burns up defilements. So it sounds like it's like really sort of gung-ho, super. But that's not really. It's the effort, the optimum effort at any time will inevitably eliminate defilements. So it's the optimum, the right amount of effort is atapi. You need mindfulness, which means not forgetting, bearing in mind, bringing to mind, bearing in mind. So in daily life, if you're driving a car again, you're bearing in mind the highway code. You're being mindful of the highway code. You don't really think about it as a mindfulness practice, but it's there in your mind, isn't it? This is mindfulness. So mindfulness is not just being present in the present moment, whatever happens. It has, in Buddhist understanding of sati, there has to be sammaditthi. There has to be an understanding of kusala and akusala. Because sati is not taken out of the whole body of the Buddha's teaching, out of the Eightfold Path. In an example, you might have some problem with somebody at work, and you can't help but sometimes say something nasty to them or treat them. And then, let's say you're meditating in the evening, and the memory of it comes up, and mindful, watch it arising, watching it passing away, and it passes away. And you do that every day. Okay, are you practicing well? No, because what you should be doing is going and talking to that person, and if you behave badly or they behave badly, this is a matter of sila and communication, and not creating the causes for the negative dhammas that you're trying to be mindful of when you're meditating. So the content of what comes up in your mind, where does that come from? It comes from daily life, and a lot of the stuff that you have to deal with and let go of in meditation, it just makes more sense. Cut it off at the root, so there's nothing coming up that you have to let go of. If you're feeling remorseful about something, then can you deal with that and change how you act, change how you speak, or ask for forgiveness, or sort things out. So meditations have become like this thing these days. Everybody, I meditate. But it's the Eightfold Path. And meditation's not like a wish-fulfilling jam, and you just go meditate and everything will be okay. No. There are a lot of ways you can use meditation in unwholesome ways. So being mindful. I made a point in sila, is being like how do you be mindful in meetings and conversations and things where you don't have really time to adapt and you can't look at your breath while you're in a conversation or an argument. What you can have in your mind, your basic, is not the only thing, but is no lies. No lies. So whatever you're saying is like, this is your mindfulness object. Whatever comes out of your mouth, no lies. That in itself will just bring so much clarity to your mind if you do that. You can go on beyond that, make it a little bit more sophisticated, take the supasita, speaking only truths which are beneficial, right time and place, with a kind heart, and using appropriate, polite speech. So that, but your basic meditation object, mindfulness object of sati, is the precepts. Okay, once you have that in, then you can be more and more aware of what's going on in your body and mind, and see. But it's not just being aware of it; it's seeing it within the framework of right view, and right view here meaning what is wholesome and what is unwholesome, what is to be cultivated, what is to be abandoned. So that's sati. So I've been talking for 45 minutes. I want to have some time for Q&A. Two things, two dhammas, hiri and ottappa. So it's like, they're not also really kind of popular, are they? Like things, fear and shame. Yeah, you should develop fear and shame. It's not something, you think, today I'm going to develop some fear and shame. But looking forward to it. Maybe I'll go on a fear and shame retreat for 10 days. But what these two dhammas, Hiri-ottappa, are pointing to is using the thinking mind, developing upaya and skillful means to be conscious of your conventional reality, let's say. So we're put anatta to one side for the moment, our conventional reality as human being, as a citizen of Malaysia or Thailand, at being a Buddhist, being a father or a mother or sister, brother, son, daughter, employer, employee. We have all these different roles to play in life. And we need to bring our mind to play. For me, what do I consider? What is it to be a good human being? What does it mean to be a good citizen? What does it mean to be a good Buddhist? What does it mean to be a good father or a good mother or a brother, a sister, and so on? So you're bringing your mind, clarifying your values and your ideals. And if you do this enough, and for monks we have this as well. We have what's called samana sanya, which we're told to constantly, I'm a monk now, I'm not a lay person. I can't walk and talk just like lay people do. I'm a monk, I'm a representative of the Sangha. This is something that the Buddha taught monks to reflect on every day. And there are 10 reflections for the samana to bring up what we call samana sanya, the perception of oneself as a samana. So before you go beyond all attachment to perceptions, you develop wholesome, wise perceptions. So in the case of a layperson, when we're going through all those, I'm a lay Buddhist, I'm a member of Bubs, what does that mean to me? Go through all these different conventional identities. And then when they become very clear in your mind and you're very committed to them, then when you're about to act or speak in a way which is in conflict with your values and ideals, there's a feeling that arises. And that feeling is what's called shame in Pali. Okay? Now, reflecting on the law of karma and how every action has a result, it's not so easy, is it, to really see this in daily life, because some karma is experienced in present life, some next life, some future lives. So we have all this kind of stuff from the past which we can't quantify, we can't really know much about. And every time, but the analogy I would like to share with you is of a very long river, and on one bank there are factories releasing acid into the river, and on the other bank factories releasing alkaline. So scientists amongst you will know if you put acid to the water, the pH level of the water will go down, and if you put alkaline, the pH of the level of the water will go up. So if you had hundreds and hundreds of these factories, then you couldn't just look at the present pH value and relate that to a particular factory, because it depends how factories on either bank are reducing or increasing the pH value of the water. So it's not an exact analogy, but it means that every time we act, or every time we speak, we are adding to that river. And sometimes you can see clearly, like, let's give an example back at work, and you have a problem with somebody, and you're very patient, trying to be a good Buddhist, let go, and then one day you've had a bad morning, and you just lash out, and you feel really good for about a minute, and then you feel bad for the rest of the day. But the point here is, let's say day 2, and this person is acting in an obnoxious way. I think you would see that it would be much more likely that you would lash out again than previously, because now you have an example. You've done it once. And second, so in maths, from 0 to 1 and from 1 to 2 is the same distance, isn't it? But psychologically it's not. There's a huge distance from 0 to 1, but there's quite a short distance from 1 to 2, a shorter distance from 2 to 3, and something that you would never have thought possible a month ago now has actually become kind of normal. This is one expression of karma in daily life. So you want to be reflecting on karma, reading about karma, listening to it, looking at experience. And then when you're going to act in a way and speak in a way that is coming from defilement, then you have this kind of shrinking back. It's not like fear, like in seeing a ghost or something, but it's just like this. That's scary. I don't want to be doing that. I'm just going to make a lot of problems for myself in future. So these are 2 emotional reactions, but they don't just come out of nothing. If they're going to be Dhamma principles that strengthen your practice, you have to be doing this thinking work, this developing the right, correct sanya, and developing skillful means to help you to do that. So the very last point I make is, again, powers of mind. So we have these 5 powers, these 5, we call it indriyas or palas, and there is faith, effort, mindfulness, samadhi, and wisdom. You may be familiar with it. So there's 2 ways of looking at this. Faith leads to effort, leads to mindfulness, leads to samadhi, leads to panya. It's like a ladder. And the other way of looking at it is like a seesaw with sati, mindfulness, in the middle, and panya and saddha on the outer edge of the seesaw. So faith balances wisdom, wisdom balances faith, and then you have samadhi is balanced by effort, and effort by samadhi. Samadhi without effort, get a bit dull. Too much effort without samadhi is agitation. And sati doesn't need anything to balance it, because sati is the balancing factor in the middle. Saddha in Buddha Sasana is not the same as belief in dogmas, and the Buddhist teaching is sandittika. It means that it is verifiable. So with most belief system religions, you have certain dogmas which are impossible for a human being to prove. You have 2 choices, believe or disbelieve. But the Buddha's teaching is pointing to the human being and saying that human suffering arises because of the ignorance of the way things are, which expresses as craving for sensory experience, craving to become, craving to get rid of, and that craving can be eliminated through the Eightfold Path. We have the capacity, we have the potential for Bodhi, for enlightenment, by following the Buddha's path. We can abandon the unwholesome, we can develop the wholesome, we can purify the mind. So these are not dogmas, are they? I mean, if you say, yeah, that makes sense, then if you are sincere, you have to put it to the test of experience. Can I actually, using the Buddha's teaching, can I really abandon the unwholesome? Can I really develop the wholesome? Can I really purify my mind? And doubting the teachings in this way and saying, oh, well, I'm not going to just take them on track, I'm going to put them to the test of my experience. This is not considered like disrespectful to the Buddha. On the contrary, the Buddha said that someone who takes the teachings and puts them to the test of experience, he calls this bhati puja. It's the highest kind of puja. Like paying reverence to the Buddha with flowers and incense, it's okay, it's all right, quite nice. But what the Buddha really wants is to pay reverence to him by taking his teachings seriously and putting them to the test of our experience, so that we can realize Bodhi. So, I'd like to end the teaching here. Just to recap, I talked about Bodhi, which is B, upaya, which is U, Brahma Viharas, which is B, Sati, which is S. How does that spell? Hiriotapa, how many is that? 2, 5 powers, 2, 5, 25, Bubs, 25. So this is my gift for you and my expression of my anumodana for this wonderful.